Zolan Cano-Youngs, what are your reflections 6 years on from George Floyd's murder? I mean, obviously, in that time, we saw Chauvin convicted, put behind bars, but the politics of that moment have also evolved significantly.
I mean, this country is still trying to figure out how to grapple with racism within this country and racism in the history of this country. Last year, my colleague Kurt Streeter, wrote about a small community that was trying to decide what is the best way to move ahead with protests, at the anniversary of George Floyd's killing, and what is the right form of protest. The other takeaway is also the pendulum that we've seen as far as how the private sector and government has reacted to this killing. In the immediate months afterwards, we often saw private companies announcing diversity initiatives. We saw a government as well talking about those diversity initiatives. And years later, we are at a point where we now seen a DEI purge, right, from the federal government. Diversity programs being really treated as taboo, right? We've seen actually an erosion of certain provisions in the Civil Rights Act as well. And you're left wondering, that momentum in the immediate aftermath of George Floyd's killing, and now looking at where we are now, just what the future is for this country as well when it comes to how it grapples with, civil rights, diversity, and accountability for law enforcement.
Well, Congressman McHenry, I mean, how do you kind of look at what came out of the murder of George Floyd, the sort of political cataclysm that followed that, and where we find ourselves today, especially in light of, there are going to potentially be a significant number of black lawmakers who are no longer members of Congress after the changes to the Voting Rights Act.
And a significant number of white Democratic lawmakers that have lost their seats, and they're the first on the chopping block with the Supreme Court ruling. So it's not all a straight line and it's simple to put in a box. But let's rewind. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Everything was shut down. Things were reopening. This happened, and this happened in such a public way when people are locked down that is almost a universal sign that we haven't had in this modern media environment, where almost every American saw this for themselves and judged for themselves. It was a jarring moment, significant, terrible moment, and the immediate response in a lot of respects was hyper-political. But long-term, you saw the justice system work, and the bad cop here who did the bad thing got a sentence commensurate with that, as the justice system prescribed. That is a good thing, and that is a good thing in response to a question of racism and racist acts. The secondary piece, which is the political actions of corporate America, they over-responded because they didn't know what the hell they were doing, quite frankly. And they over-responded and indexed to something that was not a long-term good. And you still have corporate initiatives that want to have a workforce that is actually commensurate with the communities they're serving and the people they're serving. It looks like a lot like America, but they're actually driving real progress over time rather than the politics of this stuff. And much of what was announced in response in 2020 of the politicization in C-suites across America was exactly politics. Short-term, ephemeral, not long-lasting, no public good out of this thing. And a lot of corporate America looked really dumb doing that indexing rather than actually do the substantive things of actually doing recruitment where they should be doing recruitment across campuses in America, rather than just showing something in politics here in committee rooms in Capitol Hill. So there's still initiatives here. Corporate America is still serious about it, but instead of indexing the politics, they should be focused on the substance. And I think that's what we need to look for as a society and know that we should struggle, not just in the C-suite, not just in politics, but how we interact with each other in a respectful way. And that long-term respect is really what our society needs a lot more of.
The question of whether, certain diversity initiatives and wokeism went too far is something you would hear, like on the campaign trail from voters. But, when you look at this past year, I know that I've spoken to Americans and voters across the political spectrum that, say, okay, it's one thing to say whether the culture of woke and DEI went too far. but then you see a plane crash. The president blamed a plane crash and parked on diversity, right? You see a refugee system that blocks everyone from around the world, with the exception of a white minority as well. You see a call from the federal government as well to look into, put out there to the public, we want to look into more cases where white men were discriminated against. I was in the Oval Office and I asked President Trump as well, when you look back on the civil rights movement, what do you think? And what's the impact that came out of that? And he said as well, that one impact was that white men also were hurt by the civil rights movement. You have those things, and I think it's a little separate from the argument that maybe we needed the pendulum to swing back on woke and DEI.
All right. Coming up next here, we've got some